3 years ago, the Pentagon reported Sarah Chen killed in a drone strike. This morning, she unclogged a toilet at SEAL HQ. No one noticed the janitor with predator eyes and military posture until a splash of coffee exposed the tattoo that made a commander freeze mid-step. She wasn't supposed to exist, but today, someone just woke the dead. The morning rush at Coronado's main cafeteria brought its usual chaos of testosterone and entitlement. SEAL trainees crowded the tables, their voices carrying across the room in waves of bravado and barely concealed exhaustion. Sarah Chen worked methodically between them, her movements precise and economical, wiping down surfaces with the same efficiency she once used for different tasks. Lieutenant Jake Morrison held court at the center table, his instructor tabs gleaming as he regaled junior operators with tales of his latest deployment. He barely glanced at the woman cleaning nearby, his attention focused on impressing the younger men who hung on his every word. Commander Patricia Hayes sat at the officers' table, her posture rigid as she reviewed training schedules on her tablet. The hierarchy was clear as glass. Operators at the top, support staff below, maintenance crew invisible. But something was different about the way Sarah moved. She never crossed behind anyone's chair without looking first. Her eyes tracked every entrance and exit without appearing to lift from her work. When she cleaned near windows, she positioned herself at angles that eliminated glare while maintaining sight lines to the doors. The other maintenance workers gave her space they couldn't quite explain, an unconscious deference to something they sensed but couldn't name. She heard Morrison describing a classified joint training exercise scheduled for next week, his voice carrying details that should have been confined to secure rooms. Her hand paused for a fraction of a second on the table she was cleaning, the only sign she'd registered information she had no business knowing. Sarah's sleeve tattoo shifted as she worked, the tribal pattern revealing hints of something more complex underneath. Most dismissed it as the kind of ink anyone could get at a beach shop, but the design held layers invisible to casual observation. When Morrison knocked over his coffee with an expansive gesture, the hot liquid splashed across her arm. She didn't flinch, didn't cry out, just reached for paper towels with the same steady calm. But as the coffee soaked through her sleeve, the wet fabric clung to her skin, revealing for just a moment what looked like coordinates and a date woven into the pattern. Morrison's voice faltered mid-sentence, his eyes narrowing as he tried to process what he'd glimpsed. Then the moment passed, Sarah's sleeve covered again, and he shook his head, dismissing whatever he thought he'd seen. Morrison's attention fixed on Sarah like a laser sight finding its target. "Hey, maintenance," he called out, his tone sharp enough to cut through the cafeteria noise. "That's some interesting ink you've got there. Trying to play soldier?" The surrounding tables quieted, sensing blood in the water. Sarah continued cleaning, her silence more provocative than any response. Morrison stood, moving closer with the predatory grace of someone accustomed to intimidation. "I asked you a question. That's supposed to be military tattoo? You know that's stolen valor, right?" His trainees snickered, emboldened by their instructor's aggression. One called out something about weekend warriors and wannabes. Another made a crude joke about women trying to look tough. Sarah's hands never stopped moving, but anyone trained in observation would have noticed the subtle shifts. Her breathing remained perfectly controlled, each inhale and exhale measured with mechanical precision. The way she gripped the cleaning cloth suggested muscle memory meant for different tools. Morrison leaned in, invading her space. "What unit were you with? Supply? Motor pool? Or did you just see it in a movie?" Commander Hayes glanced over but chose not to intervene, more interested in the power dynamics than protocol. The old janitor working the far corner tried to catch Morrison's eye, shaking his head in warning, but the lieutenant was beyond noticing. Sarah's jaw tightened imperceptibly, the only sign of internal calculation as Morrison's mockery escalated. "What would you do if people mocked something sacred to you? Let us know in the comments." The tension ratcheted higher when Morrison deliberately swept his arm across the table, sending Sarah's supplies crashing to the floor. "Oops," he said with false concern. "Better clean that up, soldier." His emphasis on the last word dripped with contempt. Sarah knelt to gather the scattered items, her movements revealing something Morrison's trained eye should have caught. She kept her center of gravity perfectly balanced, ready to spring in any direction. Her peripheral vision tracked every person in the room without her head moving. When she stood, she met his gaze for exactly 2 seconds. "I'm just doing my job, sir." The The words were neutral, but something in her tone made Morrison step back involuntarily. What Morrison didn't know was that his commanding officer's office contained a classified file with Sarah's photograph, marked "Deceased, Classified Operation." The emergency klaxon shattered the morning routine with its distinctive three-blast pattern. All hands, the intercom crackled. Emergency training scenario commencing in 30 minutes. All available personnel report for briefing. Morrison's eyes lit up with malicious inspiration. Perfect timing, he announced to the room. We need civilian role players for the hostage scenario. How about our fake soldier here shows us what she's made of? Sarah's refusal was quiet but firm. I have work to complete, sir. Morrison pressed harder, making it a public challenge. Come on, we'll even let you be the helpless victim. Should be easy for someone who likes to play dress-up. The room watched, waiting for her to break. Instead, Sarah set down her cleaning supplies with deliberate calm. If you need a role player, I'll volunteer, but I want the hostile position. The room erupted in laughter. Morrison's grin widened. You want to play terrorist? Against Navy SEALs? This should be entertaining. Command initially refused her request, but Sarah's quiet insistence carried an authority that made the briefing officer pause. Something in her eyes, perhaps, or the way she stood, weight evenly distributed, hands loose but ready. They assigned her the role of lone hostile in the urban training complex, tasked with evading capture for 2 hours. The betting pool started immediately. Most gave her 5 minutes, 10 at the outside. Morrison doubled down, claiming his team would have her zip-tied in 3. But as Sarah studied the tactical map, her fingers traced routes with unconscious expertise. She asked no questions, made no requests for clarification. She simply absorbed the information like someone who had done this before. The exercise began with Sarah vanishing into the complex like smoke. Radio chatter filled the command center as 3 SEAL teams swept through the buildings with textbook precision. 5 minutes passed, then 10, then 20. The first contact report came in garbled and confused. Team 2 had somehow engaged Team 3, each convinced they'd cornered the target. Sarah's voice crackled over a stolen radio, calm and professional. Blue on blue in Sector 7. Might want to check your comm security. She'd not only evaded them, but turned their own communications against them. Morrison's confidence evaporated as reports flooded in. She'd anticipated their breach points, booby-trapped their fallback positions with training grenades, and somehow acquired gear from operators she'd neutralized with paint rounds. Have you ever had to prove yourself when everyone underestimated you? Share your story below. The command staff leaned forward as Sarah demonstrated knowledge that shouldn't exist in a civilian's playbook. Her ambush positions matched classified tactics from recent operations. She used call signs from units that had been disbanded, referenced protocols that weren't in any public manual. When Morrison's team finally cornered her position, she'd already escaped through a route they hadn't considered possible, leaving behind a message spray-painted on the wall. Check your 6. The hunter had become the hunted, and Morrison found himself face down in the dirt, paint covering his back where she'd tagged him from an impossible angle. His entire team neutralized in 30 seconds by a maintenance worker they'd mocked an hour ago. As Sarah emerged from the training ground, Commander Hayes was already on the phone with Pentagon intelligence, reading from a file marked Project Nightfall, Eyes Only. The secure conference room's atmosphere crackled with tension as classified images flickered across the screen. Agent Nightfall, deep cover operative, infiltration specialist, presumed killed in action 37 months ago during Operation Sandstorm. The woman in the photos bore Sarah Chen's face, but carried herself like death incarnate. Pentagon liaison Colonel Richards spoke in clipped tones. She spent 2 years inside the Crimson Dawn network. When her extraction went sideways, 6 operators died maintaining her cover. Official records show her terminated in a drone strike we called in ourselves. The revelation hung in the air like cordite. Sarah sat perfectly still, her maintenance uniform incongruous among the brass and classified stamps. Morrison couldn't reconcile the woman who'd cleaned his spilled coffee with the operative who'd infiltrated the world's most dangerous terrorist cell. Crimson Dawn is active again, Richards continued. Intelligence indicates they're targeting naval installations. The joint exercise next week. It's not random. They have inside knowledge. Sarah finally spoke, her voice different now, carrying edges sharp enough to cut. They're not targeting the exercise. They're using it as cover. I recognize the pattern. It's Maxime's playbook. He always hides the real objective behind the obvious one. The room shifted as she outlined connections only she could see, her 3 years of supposed death having given her perspective others lacked. Hayes demanded answers. Why maintain your cover? Why stay dead? Sarah's response was clinical. Because Maxime still has people inside our intelligence apparatus. My resurrection would have signed death warrants for assets still in place. I chose obscurity over ego. What do you think Sarah should do? Stay hidden or risk everything again? Tell us in the comments. The evidence mounted with terrifying clarity. Reconnaissance footage showed figures casing the base perimeter. Communication intercepts matched Crimson Dawn encryption patterns. Sarah identified 17 different operational signatures from her time inside the network. They're not coming for the SEALs, she said quietly. They're coming for the submarine maintenance facility. One successful strike during the exercise chaos, and they cripple Pacific Fleet operations for years. Morrison found his voice. How do we stop them? Sarah's smile held no warmth. You don't? I do. But it means Nightfall comes back from the dead, and everyone I've protected for 3 years becomes a target. The first explosion rocked the building before anyone could respond. Alarms shrieked as smoke billowed from the eastern perimeter. Sarah was already moving, shedding her maintenance coveralls to reveal tactical gear underneath. She'd been prepared for this moment every day for 3 years. 12-man insertion team, she announced, reading the attack like sheet music. 2 diversionary elements, 1 primary. They'll hit the communications array first to blind us, then the armory to prevent response, then drive for the submarine pens. She turned to Morrison. Your team comes with me. Follow my lead exactly, or people die. As the first explosions echoed across the base, Sarah Chen shed her maintenance uniform and became Nightfall once more. Nightfall moved through the chaos with lethal poetry, Morrison's team struggling to match her pace. The base erupted in coordinated violence, explosions, gunfire, smoke grenades creating a hellscape of confusion. But Sarah read it like a familiar song, each note predictable because she'd helped write the composition years ago. Contact left, she whispered, already engaging before Morrison's team could react. 3 hostiles dropped, paint rounds replaced with live ammunition now. She guided them through kill zones that shouldn't have been survivable, exploiting weaknesses in Crimson Dawn's tactics she'd helped develop. The submarine pens loomed ahead, their massive doors the final barrier between success and catastrophe. Sarah's hand signals were crisp, professional, transforming Morrison's swagger into focused competence. They breached the facility to find 20 hostiles holding position, explosive charges already placed on critical systems. The terrorist leader turned at their entry, his scarred face breaking into a smile of recognition. Nightingale, Maxim breathed, using her old code name. They told me you were dead. I mourned you, my best student. Sarah centered her weapon on his chest, no tremor in her grip. I got better, she replied. The standoff stretched taut while Morrison's team held security. Maxime tried psychology. Do you remember Jakarta? How we burned their intelligence network to ash? You were magnificent then. What are you now? A janitor? Sarah's response was to shoot the detonator from his hand, the precision shot taking 2 fingers with it. I'm exactly what I need to be, she said, advancing as he clutched his maimed hand. The ensuing firefight was brief and decisive. Sarah moved through the hostiles like a scalpel, each shot precise, each movement calculated. Morrison watched her dismantle 20 trained killers with the same efficiency she'd used to clean tables that morning. What moment in your life revealed your true strength? Share it with us. The aftermath brought brass from every alphabet agency, but Sarah had already faded into the background. She stood quietly as SEAL Commander Marcus Mitchell arrived for the debrief, his trident gleaming with the weight of real operations. He took one look at her and snapped to attention, rendering a salute that froze every person in the room. Agent Nightfall, he said formally. Strike Force 7 still tells stories about Jakarta. It's an honor. Morrison's world tilted as his commander, a legend among legends, showed deference to a woman he'd mocked for stolen valor. Sarah returned the salute with military precision, then relaxed into the anonymity she'd worn like armor for 3 years. The cleanup proceeded with military efficiency, but Sarah was already preparing to disappear again. She'd traded her tactical gear for civilian clothes, the maintenance uniform folded neatly in a disposal bin. Morrison intercepted her at the gate, his apology stumbling over words inadequate to the moment. Sarah simply nodded. No vindication in her expression, no need for his contrition. Commander Hayes provided her with a sealed envelope. New orders, new identity, new mission. The cycle continuing as it always had. As she walked toward the gate, her sleeve tattoo caught the setting sun. Morrison finally saw it clearly. Coordinates and dates woven through the tribal pattern, each marking a teammate lost, a sacrifice made, a price paid in shadows. What assumptions have you made that turned out completely wrong? Let us know below, and don't forget to subscribe for more incredible true stories. Sarah Chen vanished into the California twilight, her silhouette dissolving into civilian traffic. Behind her, Coronado Naval Base resumed its rhythm, forever changed by the reminder that heroes don't always wear uniforms or seek recognition. Morrison watched until she disappeared, then returned to his duties with hard-won humility. In the command center, her file was already being updated. Status, unknown, location, classified, operational capacity, beyond measure. The greatest warriors are often invisible, their battles fought in silence, their victories uncelebrated. Sometimes the most dangerous person in the room is the one no one bothers to see.